Hi, I'm Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. I work as a Senior Power Platform Specialist for Vantage 365, and I'd like to welcome you to this Power Nerd presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's session in the Power Apps Challenge Discord server. My name is Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. Bit of background on myself. I have been a Power Platform developer for the past 5 years, currently working as Head of Power Platform in a company called Vantage 365. I am also a kind of creator of the Power Apps Challenge alongside my good friend Jace, who you may see pop in and out the server every now and again. But I host these Friday sessions every Friday in the server by way of passing on a little bit of knowledge and helping us all kind of learn and move through things. And this week we're continuing the My First series, a series designed to kind of walk you through your first ever interactions with specific parts of the Power Platform. We've already covered Dataverse tables, model-driven apps, Canvas apps, Power Automate flows, and this week we're going to be covering security roles. Now, security roles are quite a big part of the security model in Dataverse and Power Platform. And actually, they can be quite daunting when you first interact with them. So we're here to kind of demystify that, make it a bit easier to have your first interaction with them and work with them and understand what you're doing when you're working with them. So that being said, we do have a few things to cover in your first interaction with security roles. Obviously, we need to learn first how to actually create a security role and where we put it and where we go to do it and where the multiple locations we can create them are. We're then going to look at the different permissions that a security role provides. Now, a security role is all about permissions. Security roles within Power Platform are designed to work with Dataverse tables and give you specific permissions to do certain things inside of those Dataverse tables, alongside something that isn't quite commonly discussed, the miscellaneous privileges in a security role that might have some impact. So we're going to look at, obviously, the different permissions that security roles provide us when we go to create one, the different permission levels that you can assign to each of those permissions, how we assign security roles to a user in our environment or a team within our environment. And then we'll be looking at basically some of the noteworthy bits that we need to know that isn't just table permissioning, but is other parts as well. Once we've looked at all that, we'll then have our user discussion section where everybody is welcome to ask questions. But before we get into that, I do normally, lay a bit of ground rules for these sessions. I only have one rule when it comes to these sessions, and that is there is no such thing as a stupid question. I firmly believe this. We've all started somewhere. We've all made the kind of little mistakes here and there that help us learn. And the best way we learn is when we've got a question by asking. So if you do have a question during the course of the session or when you're reviewing kind of the YouTube video, please do either drop it in the chat or on the YouTube side, leave it in a comment. And we'll do our best to answer where we can and provide that information. And the likelihood is that if you have the question, someone else has thought of it before and just hasn't said it. So please, again, do ask. So with that being said, we're going to launch straight into how to create a security role. Now, to create a security role, really where we're looking to go is into Power Apps here. Now, there's a few ways we can go from here to create a security role. The one that's the easiest to access is through a solution over here. Now, if we come to solutions and we select, you can see here I have a list of solutions already in here. I can click on one. I'm going to use my trusty dog tracking solution that we set up in last week's session where we looked at model-driven apps. And then once we're in, we go to New, we go to Security, and then down here we have Security Role. So I can click on security role and it's going to ask me to give it a role name. And I'm going to call this Kennel Manager. And for it to select a business unit. Now, business units are something separate to the security model. If it's your first time working in an environment that you have created, the normal business unit that you'll have in here is the org and then a set of numbers and letters. So for the purpose of this, we're going to select that one. And then we've got this option here, when role is assigned to a team. Now this does change how your security role works. And when we look at the drop down, we have two options. We have team privileges only and direct user, basic access level, and team privileges. So this changes how you're able to assign your security role. Okay, for now, we're going to work with direct user, basic access level, and team privileges, as that is the most common one used. And then there is this option here, include app opener privileges for running model-driven apps. Now, normally we want to leave this ticked because if we're working with security roles, we're probably going to be creating a model-driven app. But we'll cover this a little bit when we look at miscellaneous privileges. For now, I'm going to leave that ticked and I'm going to hit save. So what should happen is that should then create the security role and then take us to this view here, where we can see we've got the security role name just up at the top there. And we've got the option to copy a security role, rename it, or configure the column view. So I can change kind of what options I have there and change how this table is viewed. But that's one way of creating a security role, is to do it through a solution and have it bound to the solution. Now, one of the positives of doing it through a solution is a lot of the time we're creating security roles to access data in custom tables that we have created, such as dogs and kennel here. And most of the time, we're going to be running that through a application lifecycle management process of moving it from a dev environment to a test environment to a production environment. Security roles that are contained within a solution are what is known as solution aware, which means I don't have to recreate this kennel manager role that I've just created in the environment that I'm deploying to, because this security role will come across to the new environment with it. So that's one of the benefits of creating the kind of security roles that are related to your custom tables that you've created in Dataverse inside of the solution that those tables are contained with. You can keep them together and make sure that they are working well. The other way of doing it is by coming into the Power Platform Admin Center. So we've got the little settings icon on the top here. We hit Admin Center. And then we go to Manage on the left-hand side. We choose our specific environment. And then we have an option here called Security Roles. Now, obviously, to access this, you'll need to be an environment admin on that environment and be able to kind of access the admin center for it. But what this means is you can view all the security roles, and then you can come up to the left here and hit New Role. And then you have the exact same interface as you would have if you had added it via a solution. Benefits with this approach is it means you can create some very specific security roles for maybe environment makers or makers in your environment and give them specific access to specific tables, and then not have these be solution aware. Obviously, this doesn't add them specifically to any solution, which means they're not going to get deployed across to another environment. So this can be good for environment administration roles or setting up what people might want to do. Now, there are some security roles within an environment that already get created as standard. So there's things like approvals user. There's things like basic user, just there. These are standard security roles. You also have things like system administrator, environment maker, and these allow you to do a few little things. So covering some of the most commonly assigned kind of out-of-the-box security roles. Basic user allows people to kind of open and use apps. The environment maker allows people to create and kind of work with different parts of the Power Platform. And then your system administrator has access to absolutely everything in the environment, is able to delete the environment, work with it. Based upon that, we can kind of see that the security roles give us permissions to do certain things in there. But that's creating a security role. All well and good, but how do we get it to set permissions on different tables, and what are the permissions in there? What are the different permissions that we have available to us when it comes to Dataverse tables, and what are the kind of options that we have there? Well, let's start with the permissions. These are actually outlined in this table up at the top. Everything to the right of permission settings, this create, read, write, delete, append, append to, assign, and share are different permissions that we are giving a user access to. The Dataverse security model is really, really in depth. In fact, you can get down to the point where you're permissioning individual cells when we look at column security profiles. That's beyond the scope of today, but worthwhile noting. But security rules, what they allow us to do is permission a table to a granular level. So you can see here, I've got a business unit table, a currency table, that already have certain levels of access against the read option. Now, this is a kennel manager security rule. I want them to whoever's using this to have permission to my specific tables. Now, if I search for dog or I search for kennel, you'll notice that nothing turns up in the grid. That's because by default, the drop down over here on the left shows show only assigned tables. It's worthwhile setting that when you first come in to show all tables. That's going to allow you to pick up every table that's in your environment and then assign permissions to them. But I want to look at the dogs table here. So there's my dogs table. That's listed on my custom tables section. Great. Well, what do each of these columns mean? This create, read, write, delete, append, append to, and assign. Well, quite simply, the create option gives a user the ability to add a new row or record of data to that table. You don't have to give someone a create permission on there, but if you want them to be able to add kind of new dogs to this specific dogs table, they're going to need create options. Kennel managers are probably going to need that option because, hey, they're managing the kennel. They're going to add new dogs against add new kennels. So, hey, I'm going to set this drop down here. So this is me now changing the permissions that they have against that. And this is where we get into permission levels. So these are specific permissions. This is a drop down for permission level. Now, what does each permission level mean? What does it do? Well, none is pretty self-explanatory. It means they don't have the ability to, in this case, create anything. They wouldn't have the ability to read anything, update anything, delete anything, so on and so forth. So that's none. But what about user? Let's start with the top here. Well, this is where we get into what is known as record ownership. So when we created our tables, I briefly mentioned about the fact that we set the record ownership here, and we can see it listed out in the security rule, user or team. What does that mean? When we create that table, one of the standard columns was the owner. Now, a record can have a singular owner against it. That owner is basically who is responsible for that record. Now, if I set the create permission to user, then what that means is that whoever has that security role, that kennel manager security role, they're only going to be able to create records that essentially for themselves, with themselves as the owner. Now, if we were to then go business unit, now I am doing these in a specific order for a reason. This is in order of increasing permissions, right? If I set the create to business unit, what that means is that whoever has the kennel manager role has the ability to create records that is owned by a business unit. And we'll get on to what business units are a little bit later. If I set it to parent and child business unit, which is the next level of permission level up, what that means is that they have the ability to create records that are owned by either themselves, their business unit, or any business units that fall underneath them. You can set up a business unit hierarchy where business units are owned by other business units. And then in parent-child business unit, they have the ability to kind of create from there. And then organization level access is, hey, you have access to everything, regardless of what business unit you're in. Now, in the case of the create permission, that doesn't have much of an impact in terms of changing these, but I'm going to set it to user for now. The read permission is, again, relatively self-explanatory. It allows users to read records inside of this table. And this is where each of these permission levels really come into their own. In this case, if I set the read permission to user, whoever has this kennel manager role is only going to be able to read records where they are listed as the owner of it. If I set it to business unit, they're able to read records from any record that the business unit is an owner on, or is owned by a member of the same business unit as them. If we set it to parent or child business unit, they have the ability to read, obviously, the same as the business unit one, all records that belong to their business unit. But they also have the ability to read any of the records in any of the business units that fall underneath them in the business unit hierarchy. And then organization level access is they have the ability to read absolutely everything. So for the sake of this, I'm going to set that to organization. We want our kennel manager to be able to have absolutely everything and at least read it. The write permission. This is the next one. The write permission allows an individual to edit and update an existing record. And again, this allows us to set the permission level and kind of widen the scope. Now, for your first ever security role, you may not be working with business units. If you don't have a business unit kind of set up, the two that are used are essentially user or organization. You're either giving them access to just their own records, or you're giving them access to everything. Without business units, the business unit and parent-child business unit permission levels don't have an impact. For the purpose of this, I want the kennel manager to be able to update any existing records. I want them to be able to delete any existing records. So these four here are your basic kind of CRUD operations. So you create, read, update, delete. But as we scroll along, we can see that we've got 4 additional permissions here. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up, right? So what are these permissions? Well, append and append to we have to talk about together. When we were looking at Dataverse tables last week, we talked about the ability to link records together through relationships by creating a lookup column and that establishing a one-to-many relationship. Well, to be able to do that, you need the append and append to permissions. So I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. The append permission allows you to link a record from the specified table. So in this case, the dogs table over here. If I set the append to organization, what that means is it's going to allow me to link any record from the dogs table to another record. So let's say in the case of a kennel manager, I've set that to organization. They're going to be able to link any dog within my dogs table to a kennel record. Okay? That's all well and good. But the append to works in conjunction with this. The append to allows a record to be linked to other records. So while I have set on this kind of dogs table the append option, that's all well and good, I need to set on the kennel side the append to, because what that's going to allow me to do is allow that record to be linked to other records. In this case, I'm linking the kennel to the dog. So very simply, that's the append and append to. Append allows you to link a record in that table to another record. And append to allows a record from the table you specified to be linked to any other record. Then we have the assign permission. Now, the assign permission allows you to change the ownership of a record. So this changes basically who the owner of that record is, who's responsible for it. In the case of security roles, obviously I've set this to, let's say I have this set to user on the read permission, and I set the assign to organization. If a user tries to assign that record to someone else, they're then not going to be able to read that record because they're no longer the owner. So all this assign is about enabling you to turn around and say, nope, that's not my record. I don't own that. It's someone else's, and then change that. And then the share permission. Well, pretty self-explanatory. That permission allows you to share a record with another user as long as they have the permissions for it. But again, we can choose that. We can set the permission level, and off we go. So that's the permissions and the permission levels, what each permission is meant to do, what it's there for. That's all well and good. We've set stuff up. But there's these tabs along the top. There's things like tables, which is all our tables ones. And then we've got miscellaneous privileges. Now I'm going to hit save changes on this one. Navigating between these tabs changes how things work. So we have a few miscellaneous privileges in here. Okay. Now if I hit show, there are lots of them. These work differently to your table privileges. You only have one thing here. Now, I'm going to keep this relatively simple because I'm going to hit show only assign privileges. The miscellaneous privileges that we have available to us change certain core operations within the platform. So, for instance, we can see in there that there's a permission called run flows. If you want your users to be able to run Power Automate flows from either a model-driven app or a Canvas app, they need that permission. If you turn that off, you take it away from their security roles, they're no longer going to be able to do that. If they need to kind of open model-driven apps, that'll be a permission as well. So if I look at this and we look at show only, you can see act on behalf of another user. Activate business process flows, activate business rules. These are all kind of miscellaneous privileges that will change what parts of the platform a user with a security role is allowed to access. Now, a lot of these are managed already inside of the basic user role. My recommendation, go in, take a look at the basic user role, see what permissions are in there. One of my personal favorites that I regularly try to make sure I have access to is enable download fetch XML, because that allows me to download the fetch XML for views, which I can then use in my Power Automate flows later. Take a look through and see what things are. So obviously publishing customizations. If anybody's worked with solutions, there is a publish all customizations button. That is because of this miscellaneous privilege here. That's what allows you to do that. So these change how the platform behaves. Be aware that they are there, and that they may change how your user is interacting with the platform and may change their ability to run things like flows. We then have privacy-related privileges. This is things like being able to use Dynamics 365 for mobile, exporting data from model-driven apps to Excel, able to do mail merge or print things. These are essentially some of the kind of getting information out of the platform into things like Excel, Dynamics 365 for mobile, Outlook, and bits like that. It's worthwhile noting that these are here. If you're working for the first time with security roles, you're probably not going to be looking much at the privacy-related privileges. But that is us essentially creating a security role, the different permission levels, some of the miscellaneous privileges that are there, and how some of them might impact how the platform works, such as the ability to run flows for a user. And then obviously some of the privacy-related privileges and how they impact how we get information out of the platform into things like Excel, Outlook, and whether we want to give users the permission to do that. That's all well and good. Let's say we've done brilliantly. We've configured our security role. We're all good. We start to release the application and people don't have permissions. Well, we actually need to be able to assign a security role. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's a few ways. We can come into the admin center. Bear with. Manage. And we have our security rules option over here. So we come into the environment, we hit see all on the security roles. We find our security role. There. We can hit the little three dots and we can go members. And hey, I want to start adding people to this. So who have I got? Let's go for there. We can hit add. And there we go. I've assigned that security role. That individual is going to get access to that security role and the permissions that it provides to the dogs table. Great. But that can be quite tiresome, laborious to some degree. Let's say I've got 500 users that are sat in a Microsoft Entra ID security group somewhere, and I want to be able to mass assign this security role to them. Assigning one by one is going to be tiresome and to some degree time consuming. Well, this is where we get into another part of the security model called teams. So over here, if I click on teams, you see there's a number of teams already created in here. But if I hit create team, I can go kennel managers, give it a description, choose a business unit, search for an admin. Well, that would be myself. And then choose a team type. There's a few in here. There's owner and access, but there's then also my personal favorite, Microsoft Entra ID Security Group and Microsoft Entra ID Office Groups. If I choose Microsoft Entra ID Security Group, I can then search for a Microsoft Entra ID Security Group. I'm going to hope it's going to give me one. There we go, testing group. And then I can say, hey, anybody who's a member or a guest of that testing group, that security group that's been set up for me, I can hit next. And let's say that testing group is my 500 users. Once I've hit next and it's created the security group, it's gone, hey, manage the security roles. What roles do you want to give anybody who's part of this group? And go kennel manager, hit save, and there we go. Now, if people are added or removed to that Entra ID security group, they'll automatically be assigned that security role in this environment. And that's very, very useful. Same goes for Office groups. If you've worked with Teams, that will have created an Office 365 group. When you create a team, you can use the membership of that team to basically permission your team's area using security rules. And let's say you've already got a team created that you want to work with. Hey, it's really easy. You come into the teams bit and you go manage security roles, and off we go. We can just assign them from in there. Now, that's assigning them. While I'm in here, we did mention briefly about business units. I want to give a slight insight to what those are. We will do potentially a full session on business units, teams, and hierarchical security a little bit later. But business units are essentially a way of grouping people together and creating hierarchical kind of data structures. So you can see here the explanation that they put in here is we use business units with security roles to control data access so people see just the right information they need to do their jobs. Now, you can see here I've got 3 business units set up. This is for a ticketing system that I'm currently working on. But we've got a dev team, which is the parent business unit. And then we've got iHub A and iHub B, which both have a parent business unit of dev team. What this means is if I were to set up a security role whereby dev team had parent-child business unit permission level to the read permission on specific tables, that dev team business unit would be able to see everything that iHub A and iHub B were owners of. So in that instance, iHub A and iHub B, with the same security role that I provide to the dev team, would only be able to see their records. This enables that kind of hierarchical structure and setup. You can create business units relatively easy by pressing new business unit and outlining what you want to do, providing information to it, so on and so forth. It's worthwhile noting that when you create a business unit, you cannot assign security roles to the business unit in here. What happens is when you create the business unit, it creates a team for that business unit. And then we manage the security roles for that business unit's team through the teams bit. But that was security roles as my first. So in this session, we've looked at how we create them, the different permissions that are available to us, that create, read, update, delete, assign, share, append, and append to, the different permission levels that we have available to us for each of those permissions, some of the miscellaneous permissions, how they might impact the running of your platform, and some of the privacy related privileges. And then we've also looked at how to assign security roles. There is one other thing that is really worth mentioning here. Security roles work a little bit differently to most kind of permission setups, in that they are what are known as cumulative permissions rather than least privilege or least access. What that means is if a user has multiple roles, the highest level from any role applies. So let's say I have 3 different roles as an individual within an environment, okay? One of them is looking at the kennel table, and I've got organizational level access for the create and read permissions, but I've only got user level access for the write and delete permissions. Then I've got another security role that gives me organization level access to the update and write permissions. What will happen in that instance is that I will have organization level permissions for all 4 of those permission level permissions that we have there, that create, read, update, and delete. Okay, so it is worthwhile noting that these security roles are cumulative. They will have the highest combination of permissions that they are provided when they have multiple roles. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments.